Hi, it's Maija here with my February reads and receipts, and this is the video where I go through everything that I read in February and see if I can buy or borrow books in March. As you might remember, last month I decided to buy as my book The Raven Tower by Ann Leckie, and I ended up pre-ordering it from Book Depository. But since it came out during the last few days of February, it still hasn't arrived, so I will not add it to my TBR count yet. So I will add it when it arrives and when I have it here to show you, and not before. So for now, my TBR count at the start of this video is 79 books. So let's start with the reads, and the first thing that I read in February was Lou Bat or Bone Volume 9 by Jeff Smith. This is the last volume in this middle grade epic fantasy series that was a reread for me. So I talk more about this whole series in my January reads and receipts, since I finished this series on the very 1st of February, so I sort of talk about the whole series then. But this particular volume, I didn't really enjoy the plot that much of this final volume, but I really liked the ending. I liked the character beats in the epilogue, so that added 0.5 stars, and I gave this 3.5 stars. This was borrowed from the library, so it doesn't bring my TBR count down. Then I finished an owned ebook of mine, and that was Murder in the Mews by Agatha Christie, which consists of 4 short Poirot mysteries. So I do tend to prefer the Poirot novels to the Poirot short stories, but since this one only had 4, they had this nice length that had enough room for a mystery with some nice details, and they also had this Poirot episode length feel. I especially like to see that in the title story, Poirot and Inspector Chap were spending time together, like just hanging out as friends, which you don't see that often, well, before the inevitable murder happened, but I like that part, and I ended up giving this 4 stars. It was a quite nice collection. Next I finished another owned ebook, and that was The Changeling by Victor Laval. This was actually the only thing that I finished for Blackathon. I didn't do that well with any of my readathons that I made the TBR for, so Blackathon or February, I pretty much failed all my readathons. This was a horror novel about Apollo Kagwa, who is a new father who really loves his newborn son, but the relationship with his wife Emma Valentine has become fraught. And the book starts as this sort of very everyday book of Apollo's youth and him growing up and meeting Emma and then having a relationship and the birth of the baby. But then it gets off the rails when Emma commits a horrific act and the novel spirals into something much, much weirder. This was a very well done modern fairy tale, horror cautionary tale about men struggling with fatherhood and men struggling with believing women while taking men at face value. This was very interesting after the turning point of the plot happened, but I didn't love it. I liked some sections more than other sections. I wasn't that into the very beginning, or like 30% of the book, but it was still quite gripping. Like the writing style was very easy to read, but I also felt like it sometimes kept me at a distance, like that the narrator's voice kept me at an arm's length from the characters, it almost felt like. But the themes it tackled were great, and I love how it wove the folk tales into it at the end, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. I feel like I have to apologize again for the lighting situation that keeps continuously changing, but that's just the fun part of Finland in March, and I'm using natural light, so I don't know what the sun is doing. There's clouds, it's snowing, but it still keeps getting sunshine in my face. But I try to do my best to adjust the situation as we are going on. But the next thing that I finished was a digital comic, and that was Delicious in Dungeon by Ryoko Kui. And I mentioned this comic a couple of times. It's about this group of fantasy adventurers who are exploring a dungeon, and they are trying to save one of their group who has been eaten by a dragon. And they have run out of food and money, so they decide to start cooking and eating the monsters that they kill in order to be able to keep going forward. So it's a comedy cooking manga about fantasy adventurers. It always cheers me up, it's so silly. I especially love how the knight Laios is always so impressed with the creatures, and how the dwarf Senshi is always giving these lectures about proper nutrition and about the ecosystem of the dungeon and not ruining it. But I have to say that this probably isn't for you if you don't enjoy depictions of cooking, it's a cooking manga, or if you don't want to look at meat, because they do kill and prepare a lot of animals or monsters in the dungeon. I gave this one 3 stars. They are just a fun thing to read in the middle of other stuff. And then I went and read The Adventure Zone, Here There Be Goblins by the McElroys and Carrie Pietsch. And this one was nominated for a BookTube SFF award in the graphic work category. And I went to visit home and I knew that my sister had it, so that weekend I went ahead and read this. So this is a high fantasy adventure comic that is based on this podcast where a group of brothers and their father play D&D. And I haven't listened to the podcast. The art style of this was great. It really fit the tone of this story, sort of this bit cartoony thing. I did find the story fun, and the main group consists of this human fighter, a dwarven cleric, and an elven wizard. And the dungeon master here in the corner also like makes appearances in the comic and talks to the characters, and that's sort of how they bring the podcast D&D like aspect to the story. And I think that people who love the podcast would love this book more. But then again, people who have listened to the episodes might have their very own strong feelings about how a particular scene would look and would go. So for an example, I had heard one scene from this podcast. My sister earlier on had made me listen to the scene with the black spider in it. I found that scene to be hilarious, but in the comic it was less hilarious. The comic depiction was fun, but it suffered in comparison to the scene that I had listened. So I don't know. I gave this one 3 stars. I found it fun, but I didn't form a big enough connection to the characters, even though my favorite one was the elf, Taako. I liked how he was always looking for some benefit for himself. Then I finally finished a physical book that I own, and that was the art book of Kay Nielsen's This is East of the Sun and West of the Moon, All Tales from the North, edited by Noel Daniel. This is a collection of Norwegian fairy tales with illustrations by Kay Nielsen. So this book was beautifully designed, and the art by Kay Nielsen is gorgeous, but I did find the typeface to be hard to read, so that's a bit of a minus. So my favorite tales from this were Prince Lindworm, The Widow's Son, and The Three Princesses in the Blue Mountain. The most nonsense story of this was the Blue Belt. It made no sense. It was one of those like fairy tales just went on and different weird stuff kept happening. My favorite illustrations were the ones in The Lassie and Her Godmother, The Three Princesses of Whiteland, and this illustration from The Giant Who Had No Heart in His Body, which is also the front cover illustration. And this also came with stickers, which just fell out. So this was actually a sort of modern reprinting of an old Victorian fairy tale book with these very same illustrations, but this sort of is a modern version of that same art book with some introductions and stuff added. And I think the illustrations have been rescanned from the originals, at least most of them, so they are in better quality. So that was everything that I read in February. For the readathons that I failed at, I did start reading Roses and Rot by Kat Howard on my Kindle for February, and start reading Temper by Nikki Drayden and How Long Till Black Future Month for Blackathon, even though I only read like the first short story from this collection. So I didn't finish any of those this month. It's time to move on to the receipts. Let's start with my A to Z TBR challenge. I got a new letter for that. I got E from East of the Sun and West of the Moon. Then for the TBR chart challenge, did I read a hardcover that I own? And I still didn't do that. I think I will have to make that my challenge for March, that I will actually finally finish this TBR chart challenge that I almost started a year ago, so that I can finally pick a new challenge. Let's move on to the part that's supposed to be the fun part. Can I buy? So can I buy a physical book? No, I can't. I only finished one physical book in February, so I can't buy a physical book in March. And I'm really sad because The Wicked and the Divine Volume 8 by Kieran Gillen and Jay McKelvey comes out this month. I think it just came out. And I really, really wanted to read it. It's the second to last volume, and it brings together these one-shots that they had released before, which has all these pantheons from the past. And I was really looking forward to it, but now I can't buy it in March. And I'm so upset. I was trying to read another book of my own in February, cram in The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, because this was a book that I had started beforehand, and I was thinking about DNFing it, but it was the only one that I thought that I could be able to squeeze in during the last few days of the month. But as it was the final day of February, I ended up spending that watching the entirety of Russian Doll from Netflix, so I failed to finish this, so I don't get to buy a book. I was thinking about making an exception for graphic novels, I do get to buy Wicked and Divine because graphic novels are quick to read, and it will not add to my TBR, I will read it instantly. But I can't start making exceptions to my challenge in February, in the second video that I've done for the challenge. I just can't do that, so I don't get the book. So the next thing is, do I get to buy an ebook? And yes, I do. I read Murder in the Muse and The Changeling, so 2 ebooks that I own. And I would only need to read one to get one from sale, but now that I read 2, I can get one at full price. Of course, I'm glad that I get to buy a book, but on the other hand, this is a bit of a bummer because I really like to make my gift cards stretch till infinity and really buy just cheap ebooks. This will take a big chunk out of the gift card that I have left on Amazon. What you gonna do? I decided that I want to buy European Travel for the Monstrous Gentlewoman by Theodora Goss. And this is something that is on my library holds list, but it is about like 700, over 700 pages long, and I thought it would be easier to read it as an ebook. So European Travel for the Monstrous Gentlewoman is a sequel to The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, which is the series about the adventures of this group of young women from different Gothic novels. And I talk more about The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter in my Best Books of 2018 video, but now I will buy the second book, European Travel, which costs $10. So let's buy now with one click. And the book is downloading. And the final question is, of course, can I borrow a book from the library? And no, I can't. I would have needed to read 2 physical books and 1 ebook, and I didn't read 2 physical books, so I don't get to borrow The Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse, which was the one that I would have borrowed, because I wanted something fast-paced and actiony, and it's this urban post-apocalyptic fantasy. Maybe it's good that I didn't get a library book, because all of the holds that I talked about in my last video came in, the ones that I hadn't frozen. So these are the library books that I have in March. The first is the one that I unfroze in my last video, The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. I'm about 100 pages into it, so about a little under a third of the way through. Then I have the 3 books that were not frozen and all came in at the same time. I actually forgot to say in my last video that I hadn't frozen Delicious in Dungeon by Ryoko Kui Volume 3, because I had bought the first 2 volumes in digital comics from Comixology. My library decided to order these, so I am very happy that I didn't have to buy the third one, and I could read it in physical form. I have already read this. The second new thing that wasn't frozen was Dragon and Pearl by Yoon Ha Lee, a science fiction story, a middle grade science fiction about a fox shapeshifter, a fox spirit girl. And then I also got Exit Strategy by Martha Wells, which is the 4th Murderbot novella, the final Murderbot novella, but there will be a novel. I have already read this one. It was really good. Spoilers for March reads and receipts. And I still have the one Agatha Christie book out from the library. I just keep renewing it. So yeah, with all of those, maybe it's good that I didn't get Trail of Lightning this month. So last month I forgot to show you my notebook and how I mark these things. I have shown this to you when it was blank. There's space for physical books and ebooks, and I just cross the check box and write what I read. And then on the other side there's a both thing. So the first one is a physical book and the second one is for the ebook, and I color it in as green if I do get to buy a book and as red if I don't get to buy it. And when I do buy one for the green square, I also mark the checkbox and write in what I bought. And then there's separate place for the library book. So all that is left are the stats. In February I read 6 books. That was 1,619 pages. I read on average 58 pages a day and took 5 days to read a book. So my current physical number stands at 78. I only got it down 1 book. I hope to do better in March. So I will catch you then with another reads and receipts, and I will see you in my next video.